was doing the right things, but I was doing them in the wrong way. And so I'm like a weightlifter trying to lift with my back. I'm like a swimmer who hasn't learned to breathe properly yet. I'm like a baker who's trying to knead all the bread by hand instead of you having a machine.
Gotcha.
And so that's the distinction. Essentialism is about figuring out what the right things are, and effortless is about doing them in the right way.
Helping hardworking real estate investors, agents, and entrepreneurs grow a better business, mindset, and future. This is the Carrot Cast Podcast. Now here's your host, Trevor Mock.
What's up, y'all? I'm coming at you with a special episode of the Carrot Cast today. And you guys will know from listening to the past episodes, we're somewhere between 250 and 300 episodes now in the podcast, pushing 300 5-star reviews. And I talk about the things that impact my life the most. And one of those things is books. I read 10 pages a day, every single day without fail. And one of the early books that changed the way I thought about things when I was in a spot in life where I was hyper busy, where I didn't know how to tell priority when things are really, really hard. And it's not like everything's easy now. We go through phases. But I heard someone refer me to this book right here, Essentialism from Mr. Greg McKeown. Also runs a podcast called the What's Essential Podcast. Go find it wherever you can find podcasts. We'll talk about that more. But as I went through this book, y'all, it was one that I've referred to insanely amount of people. And I'm so glad that we have Mr. Greg McKeown on today's Carrot Cast to talk about not just essentialism. The concepts in this book have changed my life, but also a new book that he's got coming out called Effortless, which I'm excited about that insanely because I didn't even know that book was coming out until we had a chance to connect with you. And I'm going, oh my gosh, this is the next thing from Greg, and it's going to be so great. So welcome onto the Carrot Cast, Mr. Greg McKeown.
Trevor, it's so nice to be with you. Thank you.
So, Greg, there's probably a ton of people who've heard about you. Before we hopped on, I popped on social media. Hey, I'm getting on with Greg, the author of Essentialism. And so many people popped in there saying, I'm reading it right now. I read it yesterday. Wrapped it up. It changed my life 3 years ago. So for the few people who might not know about Essentialism or the work that you've done, let's kind of break down number one, who are you? What are you passionate about in the world and in putting your message out to the world? And where do you live? What's your family life look like? And we'll dive into the topic.
Yeah, let's start with family. I live north of Malibu in California. I'm married to my wife, Anna. We have 4 children. They're all teenagers now. My whole life's passion really became clear. There's a little story here if you want it.
I love it.
I was staring at a piece of paper in my hands like more than 20 years ago now with all these scribbles and answers on it. I look at it and I'd been brainstorming the question, what would you do if you could do anything? And when I was finished, as I'm staring at this list, I realized that law school is not on the list. Which is inconvenient because I was at the time at law school in England, but I was visiting a friend in the United States. And I just visited with somebody who had said, look, if you do decide to stay in America, then you should help us with whatever. And it set me off on this just sudden brainstorm, okay, what is it? What would that essential path be if you didn't have to just do what you're already doing? And for me, what was on the page, what I wanted to do was to teach and to write, and to really operate at my highest point of contribution. And that's what I felt compelled to do. And then I thought, best call my parents. And so I called the 15-digit number back to England, and my father answered. What would you say? Actually, Trevor, it's on you now. What would you say after all that time, all that money, all that effort? Your son calls you from halfway around the world, and he's thinking about quitting law school. What are you going to say?
Man, so my mindset today, because I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, I've never worked for anyone. I would jump for joy for Colton, my boy, and say, dude, I'm so glad you found it. But I don't think that's a common answer. So what did your dad say? Yeah, exactly.
My dad, he listened, which is not entirely like him. And then he became quite Churchillian about the whole thing. Son, we always told you. And then because Englishmen quote Shakespeare over tea and crumpets for breakfast in the morning, he pulls a line straight out of Hamlet. He says, look, to thine own self be true. And look, you don't always have to get it right, but that was a right moment. And it helped me to move forward in the direction I probably was going to move forward anyway, but it felt like, supportive. Yeah. And one more data point that I was on the right path. And really what has driven me all these years is this feeling that if you can search out and find answers that reframe common perspectives, then you can suddenly have an experience almost immediately of transformation that you can, and I love to be at that juncture where you can try and find a way an idea that's holding somebody back, a set of assumptions that are invisible. Yeah. And by discovering that you are seeing through that lens, and if you remove that lens, you can suddenly have this meteoric change in perspective, but then in performance. Yep. Is something that is deep in me. I love it. There's a term, biblical. It was originally, the term was metanoia. It's in the Bible. When it was translated into English, it was translated into the word repent. But that word, what it really means, the original, is to see yourself, other people, and the world through a different lens. Gotcha. And that, just with a new way. And I love that idea.
And Greg, that concept is so powerful and important, right? Because you talk about seeing the world through a new lens, through a different lens. And there's probably a lot of people listening to this saying that sounds amazing, but how do I see where's the new lens? How can I see it? And one thing that was really powerful that helped you was you asked a question. It was a clarifying question. And throughout essentialism, there's a lot of things where you ask questions and it helps to kind of clear that up. And that's one really powerful thing we'll kind of dig into. And we'll spend a little bit of time on essentialism, but then I'm going to spend most of the time on the new book on Effortless, because so many people, myself included, oftentimes fall in phases in life where there's all these options, right? There's all these things we could do. There's all this distraction on our phones. There's a million things to do in our Asana checklist, and there's always more coming at us. And it's that constant struggle of, number one, how do we boil down to the essential? And we'll talk about that. But then number two, once we figure that out, how do we make that work effortless to move mountains with less work? So if you're cool with it, let's dive into essentialism a little bit. You'd mentioned when you called up your father and talked about that decision, that he gave you the go-ahead. Kind of what happened next in your research as you started to research and work with people and that ended up becoming the book Essentialism? What led you to the concepts that became the book? And then we'll talk about the concepts after that.
Well, there were actually two experiences, one professional and then one personal. And as those came together, I realized that there was a perspective that could shift both organizations and also individuals, both professional and personal. So I was working with Silicon Valley companies and noticed a predictable pattern, that sort of 4-stage pattern. When you were early stage startup, if they focused and got clear, so phase 1 clarity, then it led to phase 2 success, which led to options, which itself all sounds like the right problem to have, but it does in fact turn out to be a problem if it leads to phase 4, which is what Jim Collins called the undisciplined pursuit of more.
Gotcha.
And so that's this, what I call the paradox of success. And many companies and many teams go through this. And the antidote to the problem is the disciplined pursuit of less but better. So you're constantly being selective and thoughtful about what you do. And as I was noticing that pattern, I also received an email from a colleague at the time that said, look, Friday would be between 1 and 2 p.m. would be a very bad time for your wife to have a baby. because I needed to be at this client meeting. And Friday at night, we were in the hospital and our daughter was born. And I, instead of being focused, I am feeling like, how can I do both? How can I do it all? And so I went to the meeting, and even afterwards, my colleague said, "Oh, no, don't worry about it. The client's going to respect you for the choice you just made." And I don't know that the look on their faces did evince that sort of respect or confidence. But even if they did, even if they're right, I'd made a fool's bargain. I'd violated something more important by trying to do both.
Gotcha.
What was important and what was less important, and you end up with neither. And what I learned from that was simple, which is if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will.
Yep, 100%.
And that's true in both professional setting. We have to be thoughtful and clear about what is essential. And it's also clear in a personal setting where if you're not careful, we're going to get to the end of our lives and our tombstone's going to read, he checked email, or he showed houses. And that's it. That is the sum and bonum of our life. And I believe that if the value proposition of essentialism is that if we are more disciplined and thoughtful about what we do and what we don't do, if we are more strategic about what we do and what we don't do, then we can make a higher contribution, both professionally and personally. And that's if we take responsibility for figuring out and doing what matters most.
And that's one of the hardest things to do. That's one of the hardest things for us to do. Because like you had said, as soon as you start to become successful in something, whatever it is, it could be business, it could be some other opportunity, then we start to look at it and go, man, well, everything else I could probably do well too. And so that opens up all these opportunities. And I'll give my short version of how I implemented the concepts from essentialism way back when and where it did change my life. And then we'll kind of break down for the audience the core principles of essentialism. And then we're going to spend the rest of the time on Effortless, which I'm really excited to learn about that. So this goes back to 2011, 2012 for me. And I was in a spot where I started my first company in 2008, and it was hyper-focused at that time because you had to be, right? Like I didn't have a lot of options. I had bills to pay. There was no other option than for me to get hyper-focused and figure out how to make this thing work. And so I did. But then as business got a little bit better and there's a little bit extra income there on the sides, and I saw the other opportunities, and I didn't have the purpose and passion in that business at that time to drive me deeper into the one company. So I started spreading myself thin. And I remember around 2010, waking up in the morning, and we had our first daughter, McKinley, in 2010, and my wife had gone to work, and McKinley was at the babysitter, and I was supposed to be working, right? Like that was the reason to send her to the nanny, was because I was supposed to be working. I was laying in bed at 10 in the morning, looking at the ceiling going, I don't even want to do the work in the business that I'd created for myself. And it was just the weirdest thing. And over the coming months, I started to analyze, like, why is it that I'm in this spot? And it was because I had way too much going on. I didn't know what priority was. I felt like I was failing in so many spots in life. And then I actually came across a different book called The Pumpkin Plan, but then I came across Essentialism right after that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the thing. And so your graphic in the book that is famous now, and there's a version of it on the new book, Effortless, this graphic right here, if you guys are watching the YouTube version of it, that one graphic I've probably redrawn, Greg, 100, 200, 300 times to our team members, referring back
to the same team member.
Yeah, to the same, and to myself too.
Yeah.
And so that was my journey on it. I'm going, okay, I always have to remember I can either spread my energy thin and not go very far, or I could put it into a focus and go far. So I want to toss it back over to you now, Greg. I introduced a little bit of the core concept, but what are the core concepts of essentialism that if people were just to know a few of the things from the book? I want you guys all to go get the book, first of all, and get Effortless. Order them both right now. You're going to need them. You're going to want them. But what are the core principles of essentialism so people can wrap their minds around how to pare down to the most important?
Yeah. I mean, look, first, it is a mindset, right? So there's 4 parts to the book. Part one is the mindset. And it really matters to dismantle the existing cluttering, dominant assumption of what I call non-essentialism. And so that is step one. This is the first step is essence. It's like, what is the mindset of an essentialist and how does it contrast to a non-essentialist? A non-essentialist is someone who believes I can do it all. And also that but when I do it all, I'm going to have it all. So there are, unfortunately, just two problems with that. And is that both assumptions, are so close to being untrue. They're like lies. There's lies. There's this, what sort of an assumption is that? I can do it all? What do we think? That we live in a trade-off free world, like creating this pretense. I don't know if you've watched WandaVision. Have you seen WandaVision?
No, I haven't seen that one. Heard of it though. My
children are all into WandaVision right now. Well, for those that are watching WandaVision, she creates this false world for herself, and she expands it. And I think that that's what non-essentialism is. It's just a false view of the world. You cannot do it all, and even when you try to do it all, you won't do it all. But what you'll also get is a very different outcome than having it all. What you will get is burned out mind, body, spirit, heart. You will start to burn out. You will get strained relationships with the people that matter most. And you will tend over time to start failing in the work out there as well. Now, I just described there's three concentric circles, right? There's inside the self, then your relationships, then everything else. The non-essentialist works from the outside in. They start out there doing stuff. Then whatever's left over, they bring to their most important relationships, which is not much. So those become more and more strained. They get home late. They don't know why people are tired and grumpy. They're tired and grumpy. When people are fatigued, they're not very clear about, they start to perceive slights where there aren't slights, but that's part of the fatigue. And when we're fatigued, we tend not to know that we're fatigued. So there's this, now the cycle continues. And then what's left for you at the end of the day is so little, and our perception of what's important so obscured that we, as one person said, they just spend 2 hours on Zillow, just scrolling, doom scrolling from midnight on. A complete waste of time, repeating the cycle. The simplest change is that an essentialist works from the inside out on this little concentric circle model I just described. So like, we've got to root out that nonsense. The truth is that you can choose to do anything but not everything. And to discover the freedom of that reality. The trade-off, in fact, is made up. It is like the key to strategic advantage to understand, well, if I'm not going to do what all my competitors are doing, I'm going to choose a few things that are distinctive to me that I'm particularly good at doing. I'm going to build a system around me. And suddenly there's this new freedom that you find. My goodness, essentialist discovers that almost everything is non-essential. Whereas in a non-essentialist still believing that almost everything is essential. So that's step one. That's all under this essence, this mindset shift. And then following that, and I won't go into all the details now, you can ask me if there's more, but is three practices that I believe tend to operate spontaneously, instinctively, intuitively once you get the mindset in place. And that is, you start to explore what's essential. Because if you really believe only a few things matter, you go, well, I've got to find out what they are. It's worth the time. It's worth creating space to figure out what is essential. Of course, I'm going to rest and sleep and protect the asset that's me so that I can see what's essential. So all these things naturally fit. You start to explore what's essential and make sure you can discern what matters, the vital few from the trivial many. Second, you will start to eliminate the non-essential. That makes perfect sense because you suddenly realize that every single time you choose something less than essential, you are saying no to an essential.
Gotcha.
It's such an important breakthrough. And then you're eliminating non-essentials. You're also then finally execute means really building a system that makes it easier to do what's essential over time. And so that's also where, why I've doubled down and written book on Effortless as well, because I think this is such a particular area that we fall down on, even after we figured out what is essential, is that we try to execute as if we're non-essentialists.
Dude, so I could be on with you for 3 hours, but what I want to do is, guys and gals, go get the book Essentialism. It dives in insane detail on everything that Greg had mentioned. I've got, the way that I read, guys and gals, is it's probably sacrilege to an author potentially, but I dog ear my pages. Like everywhere where I go, I need to go back and read that and read it often. I dog ear the pages, and the majority of this book is dog-eared. And so go get Essentialism. I want to highlight one thing you had just mentioned that I think is really important. Then I want to move over to Effortless is the concept, Greg, that you said of when you say yes to something that's non-essential, it means you're saying no. I mean, you're saying no to a million things when you say yes to one thing, but you're saying no to the essential things. Right. That's such a huge concept, because I know for me, I'll still even get caught in that mode where I'm saying yes to the thing because I want to please the person, or it looks like an opportunity, but I forget to pull back and say, well, shoot, what am I saying no to? Do you have a process or a thought process that goes through your mind that triggers you to go, oh, well, here's what I need to look at, or here's what I need to think about to recognize again what is essential to what I'm saying no to if I say yes to this?
I mean, there's a few things here, but one of them really is creating space to do this thinking, okay. Right? Like, having the daily planning session where I'm reviewing the day. What am I grateful for? I'm looking at my list for tomorrow. I'm then trying to prioritize it. And then really, and honestly, I have to admit, I'm not especially good at this, or I haven't been in the past. I don't know why, but I've got loose about it. But I'm really back into just time blocking now, and making sure that instead of living out of a to-do list, however prioritized it is, you actually block it. You say, okay, well, if that's important, where does it go? And so then you put it on the calendar. And as you do that, it helps you to be much more aware that when you're working on X, you are not doing this other thing. I had Nir Ayal on, who wrote the book Indistractable, on my podcast just this week. And he has this distinction between distraction and traction. I love that he makes that connection. But his point to me this week was like, you don't know if you're distracted until you know what you want traction on.
Gotcha.
Yep. So you've got to put on the calendar, these are the things that I have identified through my daily planning process that is essential. And so then as you go through the day, you become more aware as you not just saying no to other people requesting, sure, but also just, we just go on YouTube or go on ESPN or whatever the thing is that distracts us. You realize, hold on, this isn't a bad thing, but I am not doing this thing. I am not calling, the key, the key contact that provides me with the best leads to be able to be the first to the house, first to the opportunity. As I'm busy over here being distracted by something else, I'm not doing the things that actually would drive success going forward. So to me, it's just a routine of daily doing that. I do it weekly, and also a personal quarterly offsite. Those are especially important, where you step back and really try to identify what is the priority for the next 3 months.
Yep. And that right there is huge. So that was one of the big things after reading Essentialism that I took away, and I started doing that. And here at Carrot, we're 40 some odd employees now, and we do those same things. We bake in more thinking time. And whenever we get too busy and get distracted, it's usually that we don't have that time to think. One thing that we're putting in place at Carrot actually this quarter is something we call cool down periods, because we were finding ourselves running right into the next quarter. And we said, well, what if we put a cool down period before the next quarter where all pencils have to go down on project work, keep your daily work going. But now it gives us 2 weeks to really do that thinking that we weren't before in alignment. So, and that all came from the spark from this book. I want to read this passage from the new book. So let's make the transition there because I'm really excited about this. And this is going to go on my ASAP reading list. So I'm on chapter 1 of Effortless, and I'm just going to read this little passage. I think it will probably relate to people a lot. So the section titles says, hard work may not be well named. All too often we sacrifice our time, our energy, even our sanity, almost believing that sacrifice is essential in and of itself. The problem is that the complexity of modern life has created a false dichotomy between things that are essential and hard and things that are easy and trivial. It's almost like a nature of law for some people. Trivial things are easy, important things are hard. Man, when I read that section, I'm like, this book is going to be great. So let's make the transition, Greg. Where did the spark for Effortless come up? And high level, what does Effortless dive into? And then we'll kind of double click into the details of it.
Effortless is essentialism's fault. What happened is that essentialism, changed everything for me. It was it's been an unbelievable journey, and it is still. But I remember when it first came out, I'm traveling around, taking one of my children with me. I remember going to an event that had, 300 people in the line at a bookstore, trying to get the book, and they sell out of books. They've never done that before. And it was just like, traveling around the world speaking, and it's just exactly what I want to be doing. This is totally aligned. I quit law school to do this. I'm really doing it now in the full way, the full sense, very satisfying. In addition to being like the father of essentialism, I'm now the father of 4 children. And I want to be with them too. Like I'm not resenting that. I traveled most of the time with one of my children with me. Cool. And I love doing that. And I want to be there for them when my son Jack wants to get his Eagle Scout. And I want to be there when they want to talk to me, however inconvenient that time of day that can happen to be. I want to do the things. So there's not a motivation problem for me.
Yep.
And then as I was traveling one time, I was working with some entrepreneurs, and they raised this idea of, I'm sure everybody listening or watching to this has heard of the big rocks theory. Where the big rocks theory is, okay, if you've got a container, if you put the sand in first and then the small rocks and then the big rocks, it doesn't fit. Mm-hmm. So the key is, the big paradigm shift is, if you put the big rocks in first, then the small rocks, then the sand, it all fits.
Yep.
And that is a good principle, a true principle. It's very essentialist idea. So I'm like, I'm down with this. The big rocks are exactly what we just talked about: personal health, most important relationships, most vital projects. This is all true. But I started at this point in my life to ask this question, like, what if there are too many big rocks?
Dude, that's such a good question right there. Oh my gosh. I love it. Yeah.
And that was, in a sense, I start seeing cracks in the metaphor, in an assumption that I've held to as, pretty absolutely true. And while I'm contemplating this, I get a phone call in the hotel room. I get a phone call from my son, my wife's phone, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Well, not crazy. It's just not usual for me. But then when he comes on the phone, he's just like, his face is pale. He's trying to get his words out. I can hear my wife. It's clearly something is wrong. Eve was eating, then this thing happened, and then my wife turned the phone around, and what is happening, I suddenly see on the camera, is that my daughter is having just a massive tonic-clonic seizure.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's like, suddenly you have this crisis. And the crisis gets me through, the adrenaline gets me through the first moments of the crisis, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm booking the red eye back to California. It's suddenly all traveling through the night, focused on. But as the days proceed after that, as the weeks proceed after that, and there's your normal responsibilities don't suddenly go away just because you're dealing with a crisis. Now you've got another massive, major rock. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do? What do you do when you run out of space, but it's all essential? What do you do when you have more vitally important responsibilities than you can reasonably achieve. You are faced with, well, at first you're faced with like two impossible choices.
Yeah.
One is, okay, I can just drop these rocks. I can put them down. They don't matter anymore. Go. Or on the other hand, you could say, okay, I'll just sort of somehow burn out as if my own health doesn't matter. I'll just burn myself out more and more and more. But that is, again, I guess the same sense of putting down a rock. Or you suddenly, and this is what happened for me, is you said, well, I've got to find an easier path. And that to me was actually really profound.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I understood, as I took that journey down, find an easier path, I discovered really this insight, which is that I was doing the right things, but I was doing them in the wrong way. And so I'm like a weightlifter trying to lift with my back. I'm like a swimmer who hasn't learned to breathe properly yet. I'm like a baker who's trying to knead all the bread by hand instead of having a machine.
Gotcha.
And so that's the distinction. Essentialism is about figuring out what the right things are, and effortless is about doing them in the right way.
So those two right there, man, are such a dynamic duo. So I was looking at chapter 1 again, and this is a good illustration, like literally an illustration of what you're talking about on page 37. So page 37, you've got the two circles, and I'm just going to kind of verbalize it for you guys, but there's almost like a teeter-totter. One has a big kind of rock and it's massive effort and an arrow going up to the top for tiny results because of complexity. And then on the other side of it, you got tiny results, with an arrow going down in this big, huge rock called pushing remarkable results. You have more complexity, or I'm sorry, less complexity. Let's kind of break that down a little bit, Greg. So you mentioned essentialism is finding the essential few. Effortless is how do we get them done better? How do we get those things done better? How do we get them done more easily in life? Because I think that's a struggle a lot of us are having.
Yeah, I mean, look, the first thing to do with this is so simple, and I love this. It's an easy thing to do, but it's almost unbelievable. And that's partially because we distrust easy things, or many of us do. In fact, our language presents that, right? We call it easy money versus a hard day's work.
Gotcha.
We align easy as something to distrust. If you're a hard worker, if you feel like, which of course I'm not knocking hard work, but you can overdo that strategy. That strategy is only going to take you so far. Motivation and hard work are limited. And so this simple, what I put to people is just to simply ask what I think is an almost magical question, which is like, what's the effortless way to do this? Just that. What if there's an easy way to do this?
Yeah.
I mean, for hardworking people, for driven, talented, achievement-oriented people who want to get breakthrough results, what's their instinct? What percentage of the time do they think that the right thing to do is, well, you've got to try harder. You want better results, you've got to try even harder. Versus, I want better results, I got to find an easier way.
Most of the time, it's the first path.
Most of the time,
what I'm guessing.
What has it been for you, Trevor? I'm genuinely curious. I mean, like how active are you in saying, "Hey, listen, this is we want better results. How can we make it easier?"
Man, I think when I've struggled as a leader and when I have been bogged down, it's when I'm trying to do it myself. And I had a really, really good example of this back in October, and I was transparent with my team about it, where I had a load of things on my list. We had let go of our head of marketing. Amazing guy, just wasn't a fit. I adopted his list. And for a couple of days, I was completely, I don't really get stressed much, Greg. And I was stressed out, man. Like it was in the same moments, take me back to 2010, where I'm going, how do I get out of this? And I'm not really pumped about tackling the day until this question that popped up in my mind, which shifted the thought of it, is I think it's an old Einstein quote, but it's the level of thinking that got you here is not the level of thinking that will get you out.
Yes.
And so that's where it shifted to a who question for me. But I don't have a model still to go, how do I make this more effortless? So I'm kind of 50-50 now. I'll catch myself going down the rabbit hole of taking on too much stuff and doing extra work, and 50%, oh shoot, I should actually ask a better question here.
Yeah, I mean, there's two paths I could go down now. One is just extrapolating specifically when to use this, what I think is this first key question of is there an easier path?
Yep.
And then let's get to this question, this specific scenario you're in. Which way do you want to go? I want to say both, but which order do you want?
Dude, you tell me, man. You guide the ship
here. Okay, well, I just had somebody on the What's Essential podcast, Benjamin Hardy, and he presented the question of who, not how.
Yep.
He just co-authored a book of that title, and that is such an effortless question. It's an important shift. There's a whole chapter in Effortless about this. It's about the importance of trust in relationships and in teams, and finding people you can trust at a very high level, because as trust goes up, everything becomes easier.
Yep.
And when trust goes down, everything is harder. And so one of my favorite personal takeaways from my research was the criteria that Warren Buffett uses for hiring people on the team. And for him, they are integrity, intelligence, and initiative. So I've summarized that myself for me as the 3 I's. And he says, and if they don't have integrity, the other 2 are actually to your detriment.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So that order is such a clear test for me now when I'm looking to work with people. Do they have integrity? Do they have intelligence? Do they have initiative? And is it on a scale of 1 to 10? How are they on all 3? And when you have somebody that's high on all 3, it's just unbelievable, actually. What they can do, what they can help you achieve, how they'll interact with you, how much you can trust them, how much you can, just everything's easier.
Yep.
If they're low on any of those 3, it's just going to be work. You're going to be just doing tons of work. Or if you just don't even realize, hey, listen, I can think about a who. And it's always just, well, how do I do it? How do I do it? This is like, let me lean into finding somebody. If you find the right one hire, you have made 100 things easier for you.
Oh, big time. So Greg, for you, like when you were in that moment where you got the call from your son, those months after, what did you do? What did you do to still have the big rocks in your life that were important to you and do them better? What were those moves you made?
Well, I mean, everything in the book is sort of an outgrowth. It's like that was the quest I went on. That's the journey. Yeah. So it captures, I sort of have to answer that by presenting now the findings, the discovery, because some of it I can speak to specific things that we did. But one, there's 3 parts. It's another concentric circle. At the core of it is effortless state. The second is effortless action. And the third is effortless results.
I like it.
And these 3 are distinct, but they're related. In some sense, it's like 3 books in one. I mean, you could do any one of them and you could really have, I think, a big improvement on the experience of your life and the results you're going to get. But together, they build on each other. So effortless state is the center, the core of it. I mean, let's just say what it is. I mean, the effortless state is when you're well rested. It's when you're mentally alert, present. You can be here emotionally. You're at peace. Your energy is physically charged. That's the effortless state. I mean, it said more simply, I suppose, it's just like a clear. You're just clear, free of everything else. I was just on the Tim Ferriss podcast, and we were talking about this, and I just asked him a question like, what percentage of your life, like what percentage of the energy, the mental and emotional energy, has been used up by grudges and being angry at other people and that sort of thing? And he said, Greg, he's like, you cannot believe it. He's just like, especially between the ages of like 15 and 30 years old. He said, I probably spent 60 to 70% of my energy mental and emotional energy on what you just said. It was so messed up. And despite that, those years, he still achieved a lot. But just think of the rebate he is now getting as he's starting to do the work of being able to release that and let go of it. And we talked about, specific strategies that he's following to be able to let go. And so this is part of it. There's a whole chapter on release,
amazing,
on letting go of these emotional boundaries, of these burdens that we're holding. I mean, I'm telling you, for almost every person listening or watching this, there are heavy burdens, emotional burdens that they have been carrying for years, have nothing to do with the normal practices of productivity. They're not like those normal tips and tricks. They're not time blocking. They're not scheduling or planning, but they are their biggest productivity rebates they can possibly have. We don't think of them. We don't think of forgiveness as a productivity hack, but it is. And so Effortless State is about removing, getting clear from all of that so that you can be present and discern what matters now, what do I need to do so I can do with ease because I don't have all of this.
One of the things that's so huge there, Greg, is effortless state, effortless action, effortless results. Where I think a lot of us want to jump to is straight to effortless action, right? It's where hey, what are the things we got to do, right? Give me the hack, give me the checklist, give me the thing, and what you're saying, which I'm so glad you're diving into this because this is what I've been working on big time the past 3 months. Because I ran into what I call discipline ceilings, where you feel yourself kind of capping out on whatever it is. You're capping out on energy or your career or whatever, and you can't figure out why it is. And then oftentimes for me, it's a discipline. It's that I need to get now to get to the next level, I need to wake up earlier consistently, or I need to work out every day or whatever it is to get the energy back. And so, dude, I absolutely love that you're starting there because I haven't been able to conceptualize why that's important. And what you're doing in this is doing that. And so effortless state, get there first and then think about what actions you need to take, it sounds like.
Yes. And to your specific question about what we did with the situation with Eve, I mean, one of the definite real practices born out of that extremity was I would just describe it as determined, intentional gratitude.
I love it.
It was really, we sort of find ourselves, I mean, what began as just this seizure was really the discombobulation of her mental and physical and emotional capacities. It wasn't just like, oh, hey, so, now our daughter has seizures, that's not great. But no, it was a neurological condition with no diagnosis. And so there was it's still emotional to talk about it, even though I really want to, because I think it's so important to. But she had, for 4 months straight, we're going to neurologists every day, not every day actually, but we're regularly trying to gather this information, and not one of them can even give us the beginning of a diagnosis.
Oh my gosh. And
her capacities are just free falling. And so she goes from being the most vivacious, funny, talkative, writing a journal for ages every night, up trees, naming the chickens, running shoeless all over the place, to stoic, never moves, just sits, one word answers to everything, takes her 2 full minutes to write her own name, just completely different personality, and there's no diagnosis. So this is an unbelievable, this is the stuff agony is made of, and it became quite clear to us that there were two paths competing for our attention, two ways to approach this. One was the heavier path, this way of being consumed in it to such a degree that, or just asking really poor questions like, well, why did this happen to us? Or, what's going to happen to her, and getting dragged into all these emails we would get from people, well-intended, but, well, maybe she has this, maybe she has that. And these diagnoses are all over the place, but they're all Deathly Hallows stuff. And that's one path. The other path was this lighter path that included just like gratitude in anything and everything. It meant looking for anything good in the situation. We're grateful that there are doctors. We're grateful that people do care about. We can be grateful, in this moment we could get around the piano and sing together and still have joy in it. We could catch each other doing the right things. And that became a deep part of our culture. And I'll say it this way. What we learned is that when you focus on what you have, you gain what you lack. And when you focus on what you lack, you lose what you have.
I've never heard it said that way. I absolutely love that.
And I just want to build just with a very practical behavior that grew out of that learning, which was this, is based on B.J. Fogg, is the Tiny Habits author and lecturer and professor at Stanford. And he said, he has this idea. He says, look, after you X, then you should Y, right? Like, so you got to connect two things together. And so the behavior that we started applying was, after I complain, I will say something I'm thankful for.
Oh, I gotcha. Yep.
And what I discovered as soon as I did that personally, what I learned immediately was that I complain a lot more than I realized. And I think of myself as a positive person and so on, but I'm like, my goodness, I just start there. That is a state. Complaining is a state.
Yep.
And the second you correct it by something I'm thankful for, the effect within yourself is instant. The effect, importantly, in the people around you is instant. It just instantly improves the state for everybody involved. And that matters so much from an effortless point of view, because as Barbara Fredrickson put it in her research, it's called the Broaden and Build theory. When you change the state, she calls it just the emotional, just positive emotions. But when you change the state, you start to increase your sense of choice.
Oh, yeah.
When you have gratitude, you start to go, oh, there's all sorts of things we could do. There's lots of options we have. And when you do that, it helps you to build good connections with the people around you, because you start to feel like, hey, there's this stuff, we have options together, we can do things. And that gives you a new capability. So you're prepared better for the next set of problems. That's the upward cycle, and it all starts with getting in the right state. And similarly, if you're in the wrong state, if you're in an exhausted state, if you're in a greedy state, if you're in a fearful state, then what starts to happen is your options immediately collapse. That's like the fight, flight, freeze, or fall down. It's just like there's hardly any options. Well, what does that do to your relationships? Now those are all strained because you can't find any common ground. You can't find a way of being creative together. That weakens your network and system. So it means you are less prepared for the next big challenge. So these are sort of two options, and it all starts with state. And that is a big part of what I learned. We learned going through this. So being practical, when the pandemic came, the family culture we didn't obviously know this was happening, but I was so amazed to see how robust it was for that challenge. It was almost like we'd taken a sort of cultural vaccine before this happened. This life just carried on. And we all knew how to be grateful. We all knew how to focus on what we could do. It affected me with my business. Okay, what are we going to do? What do we focus on now? How do we go forward? Because you could keep this effortless state going even when the world is falling apart.
Man, I so love that concept of effortless state, because like I said, a lot of people look for productivity hacks. They'll look for ways to get energy. And I think we're oftentimes looking at just that result of that thing. I want to be more productive and save more time. I want to have more energy. We won't look at why are we doing it? It's for the state. And I absolutely love that. And so next you've got action, you've got results. I want to respect your time too, Greg. And what I want to do, guys and gals, is I'm going to give away 10 books of Effortless. Once it comes out, I'm going to do this. So what I want you guys to do is post in the comment or post in Apple Podcasts in the rating and review section what you got out of this podcast episode with Greg, whether it was from the essentialism part of it, whether it was from Effortless. The first 10 that do that, then email me directly, trevor@carrot.com, trevor@carrot.com, with a screenshot of your review from this episode. We're going to mail you out a book, a copy of Effortless. And man, Greg, the work that you're doing is, I think you know this, but I want to say it again. It's insanely important. I think oftentimes the work that we put out to the world, we hope it's useful. We hope it impacts a lot of people. And I can guarantee you, man, the impact you're having on people goes far beyond what you ever actually get to hear from people. And I want to give you thanks, just personally, on how your work has impacted me. I don't know how many times a week I talk to my team and say the words less but better. Like Brady's over there, he's probably heard it 10 times this week. And so that, and among other things, I'm so excited for you and your family for releasing this book. I'm really praying for your daughter and for you with the health situation, but also just impacting other people's lives. So guys, go to Amazon, go grab the book. Is there anywhere else that people could grab the book, or should they just go to Amazon and grab it?
No, I think that's totally fine. If they go to essentialism.com, there is something that we've just launched there where people can order the book or pre-order the book, and then they can get access to a 21-day essentialism challenge for free, and just other great things coming there. So essentialism.com is kind of a place where stuff is happening.
I like it. So guys, essentialism.com, go get the podcast too. What's Essential Podcast with Greg McKeown. Check it out, download it, follow Greg on Instagram as well, guys, and buy both books. Now, actually, what I'm going to tell you guys to do is go and give a rating and review. First 10 that do that, screenshot, email it to us. We're going to give you a copy, but I want you guys to buy 2 copies of Essentialism and 2 copies of Effortless, because keep one for yourself and give one to somebody that you care about, that knows that can make a greater impact in the world if they were only able to focus on the essential few things and have easier effort to do that. Buy 2 copies of both, gift them, and I think you're going to be putting out that positivity in the world. So Greg, thank you for coming on the Carrot Cast and sharing your wisdom with us. I'm going to keep on following you, and any way that we can help you spread your message, we're here for you.
Thank you so much for having me, Trevor.
For sure. Thank you. Bye-bye.